Welcome to the Filmcast review of Captain America Brave New World. I'm going to read the plot summary of this movie from the internet. Sam finds himself in the middle of an international incident after meeting with President Thaddeus Ross. He must soon discover the reason behind a nefarious global plot before the true mastermind has the entire world seeing red.
Nice.
Now, before we talk about how what we thought about this film, which we will of course discuss very shortly, I think we should discuss a little bit like how this movie did at the box office. Which the answer to that question is it did fine. You know, it did okay. It made around $100 million over the weekend. But the big problem is that is it got a B minus cinema score, which is the worst ever cinema score ever for a Marvel film. So it is worse than
That's wild.
Marvel's, worse than
Jeez.
Eternals, worse than Ant-Man Quantumania. So that is a bad sign for kind of the future of this movie and of the franchise in general. The budget is around $180 million. As I mentioned, it made $100 million over the 4-day, including President's Day. That is significantly under Ant-Man Quantumania 2 years ago, which made around $120 million during the same time frame. So, like, it's not a disaster or anything like that. But if you're hoping, like, oh, this movie's going to show the MCU still alive and kicking and got some life left in it, I don't know. Pretty mixed picture, I would say. Pretty mixed picture. All that said, Devindra Hardwar, let's talk about the actual movie itself. What did you think overall of Captain America: Brave New World?
I mean, this is easy pickings. There is nothing brave or new about this movie. I think that's my main takeaway. It has some interesting action, but I feel like, getting back into the mainstream MCU storyline, building up on some stuff that we saw from the TV shows, I feel like this movie had a lot more resting on it. And it just feels kind of weirdly safe and lifeless, whereas especially the other Captain America movies, like they've all that specific like subgenre of MCU stuff, I feel like has always done a good job of pushing things forward a bit, especially Winter Soldier and everything. It feels like nothing is happening here. It doesn't feel like anything is really substantive, and I think a lot of things are just wasted, especially Harrison Ford. I think is wasted a lot in this movie, especially for somebody who has a whole cinematic history of playing the American president. I feel like they could have done more with that. Even the the Falcon and Winter Soldier show, I think, was a little more daring in terms of what they pushed into the MCU and how it asked questions about what the American government was doing and how they were treating people with superhero abilities. There's just a lot of things that just kind of disappoint me about this movie. But hey, some of the action is fun. And there's some sequences toward the end which feel like a full-on like Gundam movie or something. Like they do a really good job of showing you action in the air with, a man wearing a wingsuit. And that looks pretty good. I just feel like they could have gone even more. I also want to shout out Robert Daniels' review of this thing over at rogerebert.com. He gave it a 1-star review and he like tore into this movie because of how like weirdly feckless and boring and safe it is, especially when there was such an opportunity to do something new and different. And we'll get into some of that in spoilers, but yeah, mostly disappointed. And I was just hoping for something better.
I need to point out that this movie is a direct continuation of 3 separate MCU things, right?
One thing that people have entirely forgotten. Yes.
Well, first of all, guys, good news for all the Eternals defenders out there, because the Eternals is still part of the MCU, baby.
You've
Nobody
lost a
references the
talking
Eternals.
point, Dave. You realize that, right?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
You've lost a talking point.
You've lost the talking point. Also, nobody says Eternals in this movie. They only reference the thing in the ocean. Nobody references, nobody gives a fuck about the Eternals. Yeah.
I don't think anybody knows about the Eternals.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
They should. But somebody should.
Yeah. I don't know what you're going to do, Dave, now that you can't complain about the fact that thing is ignored by the MCU.
The second thing is Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Like, this is a direct continuation of the events of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which, in my opinion, had some good ideas, but was overall not a very good show, primarily because It was extremely haphazard in its
Mhm.
storytelling and felt like it tried to do a lot, tried to have, build this Carly Morgenthau character and Madripoor and Captain Zemo. So there's a new Captain America in the movie that is
There is.
basically, in the show that's
Mhm.
forgotten by the end of the show. It tries to do so much stuff and none of it really lands well. But it has a lot of ideas.
A
right?
lot of, including, in fact, somebody murdering somebody on camera with the Captain America shield. Like,
Yeah,
it goes
yeah.
places that are kind of
That's
interesting.
right.
Yeah.
It does take some chances for sure, which is much more than I can say for this movie. And
Yeah.
then the third thing that you need to be aware of before you watch Captain America: Brave New World is the 2008 film starring Edward Norton, The Incredible Hulk.
Incredible.
This is
Which-
basically a direct sequel to that movie.
Yeah,
Yes,
this
yes.
is much
Which is
more of a
wild.
sequel to The Incredible Hulk than it is a
It's
a
a
Captain
it's a-
America. Yeah,
It's
Yeah,
a
go ahead.
sequel to The Incredible Hulk, featuring almost none of the same actors,
Mhm.
and the titular character is entirely absent.
Yes.
Featuring no Hulk. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
That is a wild thing.
yes.
Just that alone is wild.
100% agreed. Jeff Kanata, your thoughts on Captain America: Brave New World?
I'm not going to enjoy any of this, am I, guys? I have a limerick,
Oh, okay.
but it's about this movie, but it's entitled The MCU.
Okay.
Like America, what made it great has turned into what people hate. They should have expected this interconnectedness. For a comic book fan, I'm still 8. This is not going to be a fun episode for me
Okay.
because I'm going to have to stand in front of your fire without the benefit of a vibranium shield
Or other metals. Yes.
or literally any effective means of defending this movie.
Mhm.
However, I had fun with this. I see its flaws. I do. I think you can do a heck of a lot worse than Captain America: Brave New World. I think this movie is so much more fun and interesting and well made than your Morbiuses or your Madam's Web or your Kraven the Hunter.
Mhm.
I think this movie is actually fun, has some cool ideas. Does it do some bizarre things? 100%. Is it? I think feckless is a completely appropriate adjective to use in that it is overtly political movie that is deathly afraid of being political.
It has
Yes.
absolutely nothing to say about our
Let's
current
get back to
political.
normal, folks.
But
Our
it is
current political
try-
moment, yeah.
but it is like the bad guy is the president of the United States.
Yes. The president of the United States is a hulking reddish creature that is laying waste to the government.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
the movie has nothing to say about any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Surely
Nothing
that could
could,
not
yeah.
comment on our present state.
I recognize all that, and I don't let the movie off the hook for all of that. That said, I had fun with this movie, and the thing that, again, this is me only being able to talk from a purely subjective place. I say it all the time. You guys are probably sick of me saying it. I'm red in the face from saying it, and body and muscles. I grew up reading comic books. Like, it was my salvation. It was the place that I escaped to, was even more than movies and TV shows. Comic books was it for me, and Marvel Comics in particular. And there is a particular kind of comic book storytelling that this movie and some of the more recent Marvel movies are engaging in that really isn't made for mainstream audiences in the same way that some of the other Marvel stuff has been, but is doing this magic trick that Feige seems to be enamored with, that I am also enamored with, that I think is off-putting to a lot of people, but is, to me, such a cool thing. And that is, I'm going to take this very imperfect, almost mistake from 2008.
Yep.
I'm going to take this other imperfect thing from several years ago. I'm going to take this other imperfect thing, and I'm going to somehow synergize them all and make them work together, make them seem like they were intentional setups for something else, make them all, fit. I'm going to take these puzzle pieces that should not fit and make them fit. And I am here for that. I am down for that. Recognizing that this is not something that people want or need for the most part.
Sometimes you need a friend to say, you're doing too much.
Hey,
that's all.
That is a valid criticism of this movie. I am down for it. I think it is an amazing magic trick. It is truly extraordinary that it's even possible to do. And we've seen it a number of times, right? We saw it with, the Spider-Man, the subtitle escapes me, but the Spider-Man with all the Spider-Mans.
No Way Home.
No Way Home. Thank you. We've seen it a number of times where we're somehow going to make it all fit. And I'm impressed with that. I also really had a great time watching Harrison Ford. The dude's 82. Is that right? And
definitely past 80. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
He is the main character of this movie. Make no mistake about that, for good or ill. And there's some ill that the Captain America, the titular Captain America, plays second fiddle in this movie to Thunderbolt Ross and this character. It's not a great thing about the movie, but it is very fun for me to watch Harrison Ford bring it in this movie. He is not phoning this in. I fully expected this to be a relatively minor appearance by Harrison Ford, a side character that will then turn into the Hulk, and then it's all just CG from there. And no, ladies and gentlemen. This is a Harrison Ford movie, and he is bringing it. He's not phoning it in. He's leveraging all he has left to in a way that I don't even think he did with Indiana Jones in Dial of Destiny. And I just appreciated that. I had fun watching him. I think he still has moments of movie starness in this, and he's not afraid to sort of chew scenery and be a bad guy, which is pretty fun to watch. And as Devindra said, the action for the most part is entertaining and inventive. There are, for as much as Red Hulk is the star of the marketing for this movie, he's pushed way to the end of this movie, and that's a bummer. But again, I am not blind to the flaws of this movie, of which there are many. Is this the worst of the MCU? Absolutely not. It's still, I found it to be perfectly entertaining and fun. And especially if you're somebody like me that appreciates the wizardry of making things that were sort of written out and irrelevant, relevant again, and part of a more cohesive whole that just seems impossible. I think this movie accomplishes that with a sort of an amazing level of panache. So there you go. I will now cede my time to you guys pummeling this movie.
I think it's a great point, Jeff, about, first of all, we all try to be honest in our reactions about the movies we watch on here. Like we don't have like there's no movie we're trying to like take down or whatever. We're always just trying to react honestly to any experience we have. I think that the point about, taking like these disparate threads from three different things and pulling them together, like that is legitimately interesting, right? Like that is legitimately like, well, that's cool that can be accomplished. Now, whether the final result is a good story or a story anyone was interested in seeing, separate question.
Yep.
I think also the big problem is that Anthony Mackie's version of Captain America has not received a proper introduction yet. That's really the big issue I
think that's what the series was supposed to do.
It was supposed to be.
Yeah.
But we spent more time with the other
good. And also, by the way, have you seen the series, Jeff? Because he spends most of that series not being Captain America.
He's like
that,
rejecting
introducing you to who he is as a person.
Sure.
Yeah.
but it's not, in my opinion, it is an inadequate introduction to that character. And as I said, he spends most of the show not
Mhm.
being Captain America,
Right.
and then by the end, he's like, okay, I guess I can be Captain America.
Yeah.
Like this film, from my perspective, was supposed to be the introduction that America had to Anthony Mackie's version of the character, and it is sad and mildly irritating to me that it is such a crappy film. You know, like it is not a proper introduction, and it comes at a particularly fraught political moment. You know, this idea of this Captain America who's like a white man handing over the shield to a black man.
Mhm.
The fact that the resulting movie is not very good is very dispiriting. In terms of why it's not good, right? I mean, I think uh, it feels to me a little bit disjointed. There were apparently significant reshoots to this film. There is a character who, my understanding, may or may not be accurate. Was like Shira Haas plays a character in this movie that like her entire the character that she plays from the comics, Sabra, like
Mhm.
was my understanding was supposed to be like a significant part of the story, has been completely retooled, so it's like she's a completely different character that basically now is pretty insignificant to the movie.
They added a whole
Um,
other villain. Giancarlo Esposito wasn't even in
yeah,
the initial
he was
shoot.
brought
Yeah.
in via reshoots, but he's like now he's like a strangely critical part of the movie, so it just kind
Yeah.
of feels like really like a disjointed movie going experience. I think the action is not very good. I think the Captain America films had literally some of the best superhero action ever made, and now to watch the action in this film is like it's framed very tightly. You can't appreciate a lot of the stunt work. There's very few moments where I was particularly enthralled.
Mhm.
I think I have a bigger issue with just the character as a whole in terms of how Falcon slash Captain America has been depicted. Like the wings, the whole thing. It just it never really feels to me like this is a guy that has mechanical wings. You know, like it always feels like this is CG. It always feels a little weightless to me. That's just my
Yeah.
issue with the character in general and how he's been depicted.
It doesn't feel
And
like they're wearing superhero suits at all because
right,
we know
it's
they just
all it
layer
just
it
all feels
on.
like CG
Yeah.
weightlessness,
Yeah.
and that hurts it to a large degree. But yeah, the movie tries to tie together these three films that I mentioned, these three properties, and as a result, none of the characters really get very much time to develop or for them to have like a satisfying story, in my
Mhm.
opinion. So I think this movie is pretty rough, not very good, and a shame that it has been released in this state, given that it's the first movie version of Anthony Mackie's version of this character. Um, he deserves better.
He totally does. I
Yeah,
mean, to add on to what you're saying, I actually don't think the action was better certainly in something like Winter Soldier, but we get some good set pieces here. Even the initial like big fight in Mexico, it maybe cuts a little too quickly, but I do
yeah,
think the camera as well. Like you see the action, you see how fists hitting other people hurt. There's a physicality that you get to, so that didn't bother me as much. It's more the main thing that was really hitting me with this movie is why is this guy Captain America? Because we spent the entire TV show talking about the American government real bad, has not treated especially black super soldiers very well. We actually have a whole infrastructure of like how bad this country is, and now he's turning around and basically doing what he can to work for one of the worst generals that they have encountered so far, somebody who has like tried to hunt them down as superheroes. It never fully, it maybe tries to touch on it, but I don't think
yeah,
it ever fully justifies why he is doing what he's doing.
yeah. Could be a really interesting
Yeah.
question to dive into that the movie kind of waves off a little. It does pay some lip service to it, but
Mhm.
it kind of waves off a little
A
bit.
braver movie,
And
that would be the crux of the movie.
absolutely, absolutely. Anyway, some more thoughts we have about this movie. Let's get to spoilers for Captain America: Brave New World, starting right now. I have to say,
Mhm.
despite how much I didn't like this movie very much, I have to stand Tim Blake Nelson whenever he shows up in anything. You know, Tim Blake Nelson is one of our great character actors. Yes, he looks ridiculous in this movie. Yes, his character's plot line is very poorly developed.
Yes,
but
the dialogue is entirely ADR'd. Apparently, like it feels so weirdly disjointed from the scene.
But I always love to see Tim Blake Nelson show up in anything.
Sure,
you know, like
sure,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
I can't help it. I can't help myself. I was a fan of seeing Tim Blake Nelson show up. It basically, if I recall correctly, there is like a shot in The Incredible Hulk from 2008 that acknowledges that Tim Blake Nelson got hit with gamma rays.
Yeah.
And then like, you know, there's some other like references to it, but then now it's like, oh, he's become a full-blown thing. His powers are really poorly explained. He can calculate the statistics of everything, but
look at the big brain on Brad.
But look at the big brain on Brad.
Character is called the leader.
But he's really shitty at it, as we see in this movie, because there's a lot of things he doesn't predict correctly. But anyway,
he has a lot of free time to just walk around to military bases and shit. Like so much free time. My main question for you guys, by the way, I think in a lot of these movies where it's just like you're focusing on some characters, I'm always wondering, where is everybody else? Where are the rest of the Avengers? At least for this movie, where the hell is the Incredible Hulk? This is his story. Where is he?
I did think we were going to see the Hulk jump in at the end, but I'm glad they made it so the Captain America actually deals with the problem instead of, you know.
I mean, it's just like that's a big like the president of the United States has turned into a Hulk man. I think that somebody should be calling you to be like, "This is your problem."
That seems like a
you
real
should probably be there.
Top tier issue to deal with.
Yes,
at any given moment.
Where are the Marvels guys? Where are the Eternals in this situation?
Well, they're in space. The Eternals are in space. They're gone. They've been poochied out of this universe.
Fair enough. So Harrison Ford becomes Red Hulk.
Far too late in the movie. There's a strange thing that happens in this movie because we have this, I think, pretty incredible sequence where, you know, we're at the brink of war with Japan for some reason.
Oh yeah, the countries that are involved. It's like it's such a random assortment.
Let's be the most inoffensive. Let's do the most inoffensive thing we can.
France, Japan. It's like these are the people who we really have problems with today.
Yeah.
France and Japan. Anyway,
well, who knows?
Well, I mean, the commentary there is that
we'll see.
It's so bad that some of your greatest allies could become like your direct enemies. Like to me, I found that a little telling. Yeah.
Anyway, this sequence, this buildup of the sequence, everything is going crazy. Everything's going wrong. We have Captain America and the new Falcon, you know, stopping this thing, and we get Harrison Ford. Oh, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. We know it. We've been sitting around waiting this entire movie for the Red Hulk to show up. Here it comes. Okay, I calmed it down. Okay, all right. Sequence over.
Yep.
And I felt like, wow, the movie really grinds to a halt and then has to rev back up because it's like, oh, we really didn't want to do the Hulk sequence here. We wanted to do the Hulk sequence at the White House. So let's contrive a way to get back to the White House.
Right.
But I was like, you were crescendoing. You were getting to that moment. We want to see the Red Hulk come out. It felt like a wasted opportunity and we as the audience now have to, we feel like we're in this denouement, like, all the big crisis that's been established has been solved. Like we're not going to war. Everything's okay. Japan realizes it was all a mistake. It's fine. Everything's fine. And
everything's fine.
Pacing wise, the movie is a disaster in my opinion. Just like characters coming out of nowhere, villains being introduced, it does feel like the result of significant retooling in the post edit, the post production or the reshoot process.
I would have liked to see Red Hulk jumping around those ships. Like that would have been fun. Red Hulk jumping onto a plane. Come on, there's so much.
Do you think Hulk can drown? By the way, guys, do you think
he could drown?
Yeah, he
like
can drown.
If Hulk can't get out of water,
I don't know. He can jump to space, so maybe he doesn't need oxygen.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
Does he hold his breath in space?
That's possible.
So then. Yeah, at the very end.
By the way, that sequence, that whole sequence of like the two Falcons, multiple planes. I think that's where like the action actually I think holds up pretty well. It looks rad. You can see like I think the action between the Falcons and the planes looks cool. It's very anime, so it's like I don't think this director had much of a chance to really show off what he could do. This is Julius Ona, the guy who did Loose in that One Cloverfield movie on Netflix. But I think this has potential, like shows that he has a good eye for this stuff. I don't know if it's all second unit or what though. Yeah.
Right. I mean,
or VFX.
I think the issue I have is like the cherry blossoms at the end like do not look real, and I actually think that's a real problem.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you know this, but it's really important that Harrison Ford gets to the cherry blossoms because
It is.
he spends basically every third line talking about them. That walking to we should go take a walk among some cherry blossoms and such. And so for it looks like Anthony Mackie standing on the volume at the end, next to cherry blossoms, and it's like, okay, well, there's no the emotional climax of this movie.
I think the more egregious transgression isn't the cherry blossoms for me. It's the fact that we have this awesome moment where he's like, Harrison Ford, search your feelings. You're okay. And it doesn't work. And he's like, oh, well, I guess that didn't work. But then the solution was just try that again.
Well, after beating him down a bit,
Yeah.
I just wish it was a cool moment where he's like, I know you fight it. It's in you. And he's like, and he's like, well, that didn't work. And I love that. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's subverting the expectation of what that moment tends to be.
Mm-hmm.
But then we don't come up with a better solution. We just literally just do that. And it does work this time.
It does work after a little beating. The whole White House sequence, I think, is really, that's good stuff. That is good stuff.
That was my favorite sequence in the film. Which White House sequence? Because I actually
the Red Hulk tearing apart the White House, jumping to the Washington Monument, like that is making your subtext text basically, like what this movie is trying to do. But I think the imagery is really cool. The other thing is, why do they keep having press conferences? It's not going well for this president. Maybe stop doing that. Stop gathering the public around this man. Jeez.
If only he could just ensure that only sympathetic media were at his press conferences.
This is true.
I know they don't have any precedent for that, but
and also after the sequence where Carl Lumbly's character like goes mad and starts shooting him and everything, the president is in like a protected sphere. The final sequence is just president standing in front of the two little shooter blockers. Like, people are trying to kill this man. You should probably have a little more protection for this president. I don't know. The logic of a lot of this stuff did not.
I like that sequence early on when the president is giving the talk. We haven't even talked, guys, about the fact that it's adamantium has been discovered. Yeah, adamantium.
If this is the movie that gets us to the X-Men, Devindra, how will you feel about that?
We keep saying that. The Miss Marvel show at some point mentioned that she is a mutant. We vaguely mentioned some of these things, and the end credits sequence here is Tim Blake Nelson's character basically saying, like, there are more people. What are you going to do when more people from other worlds come here? That is the big sign. But at least I got adamantium. At least somebody's saying adamantium in the MCU.
One of the worst post-credit sequences.
It's truly an awful, unnecessary post-credit sequence, and it doesn't even come up mid-credits. It's all the way at the end.
All the way at the end. Brutal.
Yeah. Brutal.
It's like, I can't believe I sat through the whole thing for that.
Yeah.
But
when it's right there, like, set up the Thunderbolts, dude.
Yes. Yeah.
It's the next movie. What I honestly was like, well, I know the end credits scene is going to be interesting because they literally have the friggin' Thunderbolts next, named after this guy. So let's.
I think there's another world, right, where this movie was originally supposed to come out last year.
Yeah.
In like April, May time period of 2024, which would have been significantly sooner after the release of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so basically a lot of stuff has gone wrong for them, right? Like they've had the strikes, the whole stuff with Jonathan Majors, like a lot of stuff, the COVID, a lot of stuff has gone wrong for the MCU, and they've tried to pull themselves out of this tailspin, and I don't admire the task. But then you end up with a movie that feels like it's a continuation of the show that came out years ago, and that feels completely unconnected from anything else that's coming out this year, right?
And also, like, the real world is crazier than the shit happening in the movie. Like, that doesn't help them at all either.
That is if this movie had come out before Trump got reaelected, I would have landed completely differently, you know?
It
would have been like, wow, this really feels like a warning sign.
It would have felt a little braver. Like, this movie was originally called New World Order, and they changed that name because that has ties to things like white supremacists and whatnot.
Yeah.
And, it's a whole thing. We should talk about the ending of this movie, because I think that's the thing that really, I hate that this is ultimately a Ross redemption story in a way, because we're supposed to feel like there is some goodness or in him or something. Like, no, this guy has been an antagonist against the superheroes for a long time. He has done bad shit. We know he's done bad shit. Why do we spend any time? And why does Captain America, the first Black Captain America, spend any time trying to take care of him? And I feel like it's an like it's just like a shitty way to end things. Like, you know, the world will fall apart, but at least this one dude who is obviously an awful evil general, he's okay.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't think it does. It doesn't do a great job of redeeming that character. I want to say that I want to point out a couple things that are somewhat related to it. First of all, I really enjoyed Hui Chen Bui's from Inverse's skeet on Blue Sky about this topic. She said, Captain America Brave New World looks like Marvel got that Netflix memo about characters having to say everything they do so an inattentive audience can keep up. Extreme Disney Plus series energy, end quote. Which I thought was very accurate. Like, there is so much expository dialogue in this movie for them to explain what's going on. Right from the beginning when Thaddeus Ross is saying, like, hey, did you get a hold of my daughter, Betty? It's like, okay, just like right from the jump. It's like, okay,
right from the jump.
You're gonna walk us through everything that's going on.
And the entire audience, by the way, has forgotten who played Betty Ross. Like, it actually took me till the end of the movie, and I heard that breathy voice. I was like, oh yes,
I didn't forget.
It was her.
I didn't forget because I watched Incredible Hulk relatively recently.
Okay.
Also, didn't they show photos of Liv Tyler early on in the movie?
Yeah, she's on his mantle.
I could not make her out from any other Bruna at that point.
I did see this movie with a friend who at the end turned to me and was like, what were those giant things on that island? I was like, oh, you clearly have not seen Eternals. He's like, oh no, I didn't see Eternals. I was like, well, you got to do your homework before you go see these movies.
You got to do your homework. I want to shout out, by the way, we are a Carl Lumbly zone. Like, we love to praise this man. I do want to say, I think he does good work in this movie. Like, he gets these moments of, like, he is really encapsulating the fury of somebody who has been betrayed by the country that he protected. He was imprisoned. He was experimental. Like, you can feel that in him, and the script doesn't really do him favors, but I love him as an actor because his eyes are so expressive. His face awesome. He's just awesome. And I think you get when he's wounded, you get when he's angry. At least we got like a good showpiece for him.
Yeah. And he verbalizes some of those questions you guys say. I mean, he literally says, why are you helping this president?
Yes. But yes, it's a good question.
Good question.
Maybe answer it.
Would love to see it explored in depth. This movie, I got a glimpse of a different version of this movie at the end of this movie. There's two scenes that are kind of interesting, right? One is Anthony Mackie's character is speaking to the guy who's his guy in the chair, right? Who's like lying on the hospital bed. And he kind of gives this speech that feels like it comes out of a different movie, right? Like about like how difficult it is to live up to the expectations of Captain America and how hard and he gets like really intensely emotional.
It sounds like Anthony Mackie talking as Anthony Mackie, the actor.
Perhaps. It feels like, oh man, like you can imagine a different version of this movie that was about that. You know, that was like, oh, like that's what this movie is about like how difficult it is to take on the mantle as Anthony Mackie, right? Or as, you know, the character he plays in this movie. And then there's also a separate scene where they go to the raft, which is this jail that's in the middle of the ocean. And he goes up to Harrison Ford. He says, you know what? Sure, you did a ton of damage to the government. You know, sure, it's going to take us years, if not decades, to rebuild it all and recover it all. But you took responsibility for it. And that's something a real president would do, you know? And it felt like, oh, wow, like this movie just came dangerously close to saying something. So anyway, I felt like there were these moments where the movie kind of brushes up against making a statement about something. And as a movie, it never really does, but it does have kind of these moments where it does.
I completely agree with this criticism. I think this, to me, is the biggest criticism of this movie, is that if it wasn't made by the Disney Corporation to be a global moneymaker and part of the cog of a very lucrative franchise, it actually could have some teeth, and what teeth it could have. Like the elements are there, and the movie like can't help but bubble them because they're there. they can't help but be obvious,
right?
You know?
Right.
So like, it's not that the movie glosses over them. It's that it's just like, we're gonna just mention it. Don't pay much attention because it's true, but this. Don't look at it. It's trying to ask you not to stare too close at the thing that might actually make you think. You know, and man, if this movie could have done all of the fun superhero-y things that it does, and also be sharp and biting and challenging to the audience, and what a movie that could be. And it's a huge missed opportunity. Literally all of the alchemy is present, right? You have the black Captain America emblazoned with the shield taking over for the white guy. You have the president saying you will never be Steve Rogers. You have these things. You have the guy who was experimented on, being the one who causes the problem and is mind controlled. You have to try to explain that to me. And none of it is actually invested with enough intent to become anything. And that sucks. It truly does suck. Even as I can appreciate this on a sort of fluff level, I hate the fact that it could have been something deeper and more powerful.
Yeah. I mean, it's a view from nowhere, basically. It's kind of like, we have no perspective on any of these things. We're kind of just observing these things that are happening. And it's a wasted opportunity. And I am really curious about what the future of this character is. Like Anthony Mackie's version of this character. Yeah. Like, I don't know, Jeff, he's supposed to be putting together the Avengers at the end of this movie. So like, maybe
I don't think that's the case. I think that was dangled as something the president wanted him to do. And now that was dismantled, I think that he is not doing that.
Who knows, given all again, this movie was supposed to come out last year. Who knows like what the grand plan is at this point. But anyway, any other thoughts on Captain America, Brave New World?
I mean, they are shooting new Avengers movies right now. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what that team is.
It's very possible he'll be like leading the team that's in those movies, Jeff, I think.
Certainly possible.
So, but it's a bummer that he's never, again, that his version of the character has never gotten properly introduced to the movie going public. And I think it will probably end up hurting those movies if he is a big part of them. So anyway,
we keep saying the X-Men will save the MCU, and it feels like that is the sort of shakeup you kind of need. But also, it's wild, like looking at the trailers ahead of this movie, right? Fantastic Four, the other ones, the bad guys,
Thunderbolts.
Those at least seem like more interesting ideas. But even then, I'm like, I'm excited for Fantastic Four. I don't know if Thunderbolts is going to be any good at all.
It looks fun. It looks like it could be fun. So
looks fun, I guess. Yeah.
I guess, Jeff, here's a question. Like, and I think you've already answered this, but I just want to confirm, right? Like, I think even despite your enjoyment of this film, you still understand it to be like a decline from, let's say, the first three phases of the MCU, right? Like, or do you not? Do you feel like this is up there with the original Captain America films? Like, how do you?
I don't think this is as good as those original Captain America films, and that's a bummer. And I think if this movie had more of a point of view, it could have been. But do I think it's as fun as, I don't know. I think there's half a dozen Marvel movies that this can stand shoulder to shoulder with and be just as fun, good time.
I feel like this is the top of the bottom third of the MCU.
That's right. I would. I think that's a perfect way of putting it, Devindra. It's far better than something like Eternals. It's
completely. I'm completely disagree about that, but maybe we could say it's better than Thor: The Dark World. Like that, I could agree with. Right.
Sure.
But I mean, the thing is, the original Captain America films, like, there were literally action scenes in those films that took my breath away. That like I gasped when like
I'm not going to argue with that.
In wonder of like I can't believe like I saw that on my screen. And there's nothing like that in this film.
And also, pretty big twist at the end of Winter Soldier. Like Winter Soldier, that movie rewrote the MCU in a really like bold way, and it also even forced the like TV show to like change things up a bit too. So these movies are used to like shaking things up a bit, and it's like they shook nothing up with this, unfortunately.
All right. Well, at the end of the day, despite everything we've just said, it is impressive that despite everything that has happened with the making of this film, Julius Ona made a movie. Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.